The kettle hadn't even begun to warm, yet the quiet in my house felt heated, pressing against my skin like something unsaid. I stood at the window watching morning settle on the empty street outside soft sunlight, soft footsteps. A soft reminder that the world keeps turning, even when your part in it is forgotten. That's when I heard her laughter. My neighbour, Mrs. Carter, chatting with someone outside. The words carried through the breeze, light, careless. Oh, yes. His wedding is this Saturday. The whole town's talking about it. The whole town. Except me. I froze there, fingers still on the cold countertop, heart caught halfway between one beat and the next. My ears strained for more, though I already knew enough. My son, my only child, was getting married, and I had learned it not from him, but from gossip floating through the air like dust. When did I become someone he didn't think of, didn't need? The kettle finally whistled, a long, lonely cry. I turned it off before it screamed too loud. Silence felt easier than noise. I sat with the cup warming my palms, trying to steady the trembling inside me. I told myself there had to be a reason. Maybe the invitations were late. Maybe he planned a surprise. Maybe... Hope is a stubborn thing, especially for mothers. I found his number in my phone. I had never deleted it, the same photo of him smiling at 16, sun in his eyes, arms wrapped around a future he once promised would always include me. The line rang once, twice, then voicemail. Hi, you've reached... I hung up before his voice could finish. It hurt more than I expected. The unanswered space between us grew just a little wider. The clock ticked loud in that small kitchen. Why does silence bruise more than words? By afternoon, the whispers turned into confirmation. Another neighbour mentioned the venue with excitement. Someone else talked about the bride's dress lace, imported, expensive. Each detail felt like a stone placed quietly on my chest. They were planning a celebration, a union, a moment that mattered. And I was never meant to know. The house seemed to shrink around me, walls too close, memories too sharp. I pulled out old photographs, my son's first steps, first day of school, that Halloween where he insisted on being a firefighter just like his grandfather. In every picture, he's looking at me like I'm home. Sss, when did I stop being that? I called again, voicemail. I typed a message. I heard something today. Is it true? But I didn't send it. I didn't want to seem desperate. I didn't want him to feel guilt, or worse, indifference. As the sun went down, the shadows stretched long across the room, almost far enough to bridge the distance between where I was and where he had gone. I sat there wrapped in a blanket of questions that refused to soften. People say time heals, but sometimes time hides, and the things it hides become the things that hurt the most. I tried to eat dinner but couldn't swallow the ache, so I wandered outside, the air cool, the sky painted with fading light. Porch lights flickered on up and down the street. I wondered if my son turned his on too, wherever he was. The evening breeze carried a faint sound, a small group laughing from the next block. For a moment I imagined my son among them, laughing freely, far from any thought of me. A harsher truth pressed into my mind. This wasn't an accident. If it were a mistake, someone would have corrected it by now. Someone didn't want me there. Someone didn't want me to matter. My ex-husband's voice echoed in distant memory, sharp, authoritative, always right. He had once told me, "You don't deserve to be a mother." And though the courts disagreed, he never accepted that he lost. Did he decide the story of my existence for our son? Did he paint me as the villain so well my own child believed him? My hands curled into fists in my coat pockets, not in anger, but something older. A fight I thought I had already lost. I whispered into the wind, barely a breath. Do you still love me? Silence is an answer too. Back inside, the house felt colder than before, emptiness settling like frost on the furniture. I sat at the edge of my bed and stared at my phone. One more try. Just one. I pressed call. The ring didn't even start this time, it went straight to voicemail. That only happens when someone intentionally presses decline. He had seen my name. He had chosen no. A slow ache worked its way through my chest, not rage, just heartbreak folding inward, like a letter creased too many times. I placed the phone on the nightstand, tucked the blanket tight around myself, and stared at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come easily. Questions did. What lies did they feed him? What version of me did they erase him with? And what truth was I never allowed to know? Somewhere out there, my son was celebrating a beginning. And here I was, wondering if I was already his ending. If they didn't want me at the wedding, what exactly were they afraid I'd see? The road stretched ahead of her like a ribbon pulled too tight, long, cold, and unyielding. Dawn hadn't fully arrived yet. The sky was still holding on to the last of the night's darkness. She gripped the steering wheel a little too hard, knuckles pale in the dim headlights. She told herself it was the cold, but she knew it was fear. She never imagined she'd be driving to her only son's wedding uninvited. Mothers were supposed to sit in the front row, dressed in something they'd saved for years, a tissue ready for tears of pride. Mothers were supposed to beam when seeing their child take a new step into life. But here she was driving through silence, replaying every moment that led them here. She remembered the first morning he called her Mom. The days she held him while he cried over scraped knees or broken toys. The nights she listened to his excited rambling about dinosaurs or cars or the universe. She was there, always. Yet somehow, she had been erased. In someone else's narrative, someone else's home, she had become unwanted. Her phone sat face down on the passenger seat. She had tried multiple times to reach him, but every call landed the same way, voicemail, cold, and automatic. She began to wonder, was he even seeing the missed calls? Or was someone intercepting everything that connected the two of them? The city signs started appearing 40 miles, then 35, then 30. Each one made her pulse thud louder in her ears. He's getting married today, she repeated in her mind. My son is getting married today, and I am not supposed to be there. Her ex-husband had always been skilled at twisting things. He was charming painfully, so the kind of man who could smile while destroying someone. She fell for him once, and when their son grew older, he fell for that same charm too. Her ex-husband didn't take losing well, especially not losing control. When she left him, she gained peace but lost something bigger. She didn't understand it at first, how control could seep into custody, into phone calls, into stories whispered behind her back. She heard himself in her thoughts. She left us. She chose another life. She doesn't want to be part of our family anymore. Lies spoken gently enough to be believed. 50 minutes left. Her fingers tapped against the wheel, restless. She rehearsed the words she might say when she saw him. I'm sorry, I didn't know. I've missed you every single day. Your mother never left you. But what if he didn't want to hear any of it? What if his eyes, once full of love, looked through her like a stranger? She blinked hard, pushing back the fear burning behind her ribs. The sun began to peek over the horizon, revealing an early morning fog drifting across the fields. It reminded her of the day she drove him to his first day of school, both of them nervous, both of them trying to be brave. She remembered his small hand gripping hers so tightly. Don't let go, he said. She didn't. She never did. It was he who let go. A lump formed in her throat. She didn't realize she had slowed until another car honked, rushing past her. The world moved on with or without her that had become painfully clear. 35 minutes left. She tried turning on the radio, anything to fill the silence, but the voices and songs felt too loud, too inappropriate for a heart this fragile. She shut it off and let the road noises surround her instead. Tires whispering across asphalt, the steady hum of the engine, the soft rattle of something loose in the back seat. Her mind returned to the invitation she never received. Did they celebrate while purposely excluding her? Did they toast to a future where she didn't exist? Was there even a mention of her at all? Or did they rewrite history entirely conveniently removing the woman who had given him life? She wasn't just anxious. She was hurt. Deeply. And beneath that hurt lived anger. Not explosive anger, no. This anger was quiet, like a storm gathering strength silently over dark water. She deserved answers. She deserved to be acknowledged. She deserved to see her son get married. Then a different thought crept in, slow and chilling. What if this wasn't just a thoughtless exclusion? What if someone didn't want her there for a reason? She remembered the court battles over money over the house, the car, the custody. At the time, she thought those wars had ended, but maybe they only went underground. Her ex-husband had always been calculating, always 2 steps ahead, making moves no one saw coming until it was too late. Had he been planning this separation for years, feeding their son subtle mistrust and bitterness? Her breathing quickened. The closer she got, the more she felt that this wedding was hiding something bigger than broken love. 20 minutes left. She spotted a fuel station and pulled over. She needed a moment before the final stretch. The engine quieted, but her thoughts roared louder. She caught her own reflection in the mirror, tired eyes, a worry-etched forehead, lips slightly trembling. When had she last seen him? His graduation? 3 years ago? He hugged her then. A real hug. A tight one. He whispered, "Don't worry, Mom. I'll always need you." But people change so quickly when someone else decides their truth for them. She stepped out of the car, inhaling the cold air. The world felt still too still. She feared she was driving toward a moment that would either repair everything or destroy what was left. Inside the convenience store, she bought a small bottle of water. The cashier smiled politely, unaware of how her heart was collapsing inward. She managed a stiff smile back. Ordinary moments felt strange when your life was trembling on its foundation. Back in the car, she sat for a long second before turning the key. 10 minutes left. She whispered into the silence, "Please let him see me." Not the version of her his father created. Not the lies he was fed. Not the absence they blamed her for. Her. The mother who never stopped loving him. The navigation voice alerted her. "Turn right in 800 feet. Her pulse raced. This was happening. She was almost there. She imagined the ceremony flowers, guests, laughter. She imagined walking up the aisle, uninvited eyes widening. She imagined her son turning toward her. What would his face show? Shock? Shame? Hurt? What? Or relief? No scenario she rehearsed prepared her heart. Because deep down, she was terrified of one thing above all. What if he looked at her and felt nothing? The venue appeared ahead, an elegant white barn surrounded by cars, the kind of place people chose for fairy tale weddings. But fairy tales always had a villain, didn't they? And as she pulled into the parking area, a horrible realization struck her. In someone else's version of this story, she was the villain. Yet here she was, ready to rewrite the truth. The engine turned off. Silence. Her hand hovered over the door handle. She drew one long breath. Then another. "Please let him want me," she whispered once more, her voice barely sound. With trembling courage, she stepped out into the day that would change everything. She parked far from the entrance as if distance might soften the blow. From her vantage point, she could see everything. The guests, the laughter, the clinking of champagne glasses held a little too early in the day by people eager to celebrate something beautiful. Something she wasn't supposed to be part of. Her heart clenched at the sight of the barn venue, white oak doors, draped floral arches, sunlight catching in the delicate strands of ribbon fluttering like quiet promises. This was the setting of a storybook romance, and yet she felt like the page torn out and thrown away. She stayed in the shadows at first. The guests trickled in, dressed in soft pastels and polished shoes. Music drifted from hidden speakers, violins humming a slow, sweet melody. She inhaled sharply. Somewhere inside, her son was preparing to say, "I do." A group of her ex-husband's relatives stepped from a minivan, aunts and cousins, who once sat in her living room on holidays, laughing like family. One of them, Clara, caught sight of her. The smile on Clara's lips collapsed instantly. Her posture stiffened. She nudged the woman beside her. Their eyes landed on her like twin spotlights. Shock first, then discomfort, then a practiced, icy ignorance. Clara turned her head away sharply and pulled the other woman toward the entrance. Like she wasn't there. Like she wasn't real. She swallowed hard. The sting surprised her, though it shouldn't have. These were people who chose convenience over truth long ago. She stepped out of her car anyway. With each step towards the venue, her breath felt shallow, like walking underwater. The closer she got, the more she sensed a silent ripple spreading through the crowd. Whispers flickered like candles in a breeze. A man she once called brother-in-law paused with a glass halfway to his mouth. He blinked, recognizing her, his expression twisting not in anger, but in fear. She straightened her shoulders. If she was unwelcome, why did they look threatened? Was her presence that dangerous? Or was she merely dangerous to their lies? She scanned the yard, beautifully decorated doubles, a chalkboard sign that read, "Today we become a family." Her chest tightened. She wanted to march straight inside, find her son, wrap him in the hug she'd waited years to give. But something rooted her to the ground, caution, uncertainty, a dread she couldn't name yet. Another familiar face appeared, Aunt Marie. The woman froze mid-step. Her lips parted as if to speak, then she swiftly spun around, pretending to search for someone else. It wasn't just avoidance. It was panic. Her heartbeat thudded harder. What had they told these people? What version of her existed in their minds? A mother who abandoned her child? A selfish woman who disappeared? A ghost long buried in someone else's backyard? A young girl in a lavender bridesmaid dress stepped outside. She didn't recognize her too young, maybe a cousin's daughter. The girl's eyes lingered curiously, not judgmental, not poisoned. For a fleeting second, kindness flickered, but quickly extinguished when someone behind her called, "Come inside, sweetie." The girl vanished into the barn, and she was alone again. The air suddenly felt colder. She moved toward the welcome table. A large photo stood, framed her son, smiling in a suit that was both elegant and familiar. She traced the air in front of the frame, fingers trembling, afraid to touch, afraid to be told she wasn't allowed. Beside the frame, a guest book lay open. Her name would not be written in it. Something brushed past her shoulder, a woman trying to slip by without making contact. But the woman's eyes darted up, and recognition flashed instantly, a cousin who once babysat her son when he was 5. The cousin's jaw tightened. Without a word, she hurried inside. Her breath caught. Every glance felt like a door slamming shut. She stood there wishing she could explain herself to all of them, the truth of the bruises she hid, the manipulation she escaped, the custody battles she lost not out of guilt, but exhaustion. But no one asked for her side. Instead, they acted like she was the one who needed hiding. A soft breeze carried the smell of roses from the flower arch. It should have been calming, but something about the scene felt wrong. Too polished, too perfect. Perfection like a cover-up, not a celebration. She stepped away from the crowd and stood near the edge of a nearby field. Wildflowers swayed in the wind. She let her gaze drift, needing a moment where no one's judgment weighed against her spine. That was when she noticed across the way a familiar face watching from a patio. her ex-husband's sister, Rachel. Once upon a time, they were inseparable late-night talks over coffee, shared secrets, childhood stories. Rachel had even cried on her shoulder the night her engagement fell apart. Now, Rachel stared at her as if seeing a ghost. But unlike the others, Rachel didn't look away. Something darker crossed her face, guilt or worry she couldn't tell. Rachel took a hesitant step forward, then paused as if someone had pulled her back from behind. Her eyes flicked towards the barn doors, then back at her. The message was silent but clear. You shouldn't be here. Not because you're unwanted, because you're not supposed to know something. Fear pricked her skin like static electricity. She walked forward one more step. Rachel mirrored her with a small shake of her head, warning, pleading. Her voice was a whisper carried by wind. What are they hiding? Rachel's face tightened. She mouthed something, but from this distance she couldn't read it. The barn doors opened again, a rush of wedding music spilling out. People took their seats. Time was running out. Once the ceremony began, there would be no more hiding, no more delaying the truth. Her pulse hammered as she stared at the entrance. Inside those doors was her son. Inside those doors was the truth. Inside those doors was the reason no one wanted her here. She wiped her palms against her dress. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back to leave before she broke completely. But another voice inside her, small, trembling but stubborn, whispered, You came this far. You deserve to know. She lifted her chin, breath shaking. The doors loomed ahead. This wasn't just a wedding she was crashing. This was a war against every lie told in her absence. And as she stepped toward the barn, toward faces that remembered her and feared the truth she carried, she felt it. This moment was the beginning of the confrontation she was always destined to have. Inside, the air smelled of roses and polished wood. Soft music played a song she used to hum while washing dishes, back when her life still felt full. The notes carried fragments of memory she wasn't prepared to feel. She slipped into the back row quietly, her breath shallow. A few heads turned, a few whispers rose like small waves and then died again when she looked up. And then she saw him, her son, standing near the altar in a perfectly fitted navy suit, shoulders broader, face sharper, hair combed neatly like the little boy she used to guide through school picture day, but everything else, different, sophisticated, reserved, untouchable. He was older now, taller, a man shaped by years she hadn't been allowed to witness. Her throat tightened. She remembered teaching him to tie his shoes, the way he'd once giggled uncontrollably when she blew raspberries on his cheek, the first time he cried about losing a friend, the day he said he'd always protect her. That little boy lived somewhere behind the stranger wearing cufflinks. His fiancée stood beside him, beautiful, glowing, eyes sparkling with excitement. But when she followed the bride's gaze, she noticed something else. The bride didn't look at him with the easy familiarity of love returned. It was more as if she was checking on him, making sure he was still playing his part. A violinist shifted into a new melody. The officiant cleared his throat. Guests turned forward. Her son should have been turning too ready to face a new chapter, but instead, he was staring at her. His eyes widened the moment they locked with hers. Shock first, then a flicker something softer. Not anger, recognition. Her breath caught. For a brief heartbeat, nothing else existed. Not the guests, not the roses, not the music. Just a mother seeing her child again after years of absence. And he wasn't looking at her with disgust. He looked scared. His shoulders stiffened, his lips parted, almost like he might whisper, "Mom." But the word never came. His gaze darted sideways towards the man standing just behind him. His father. Towering, shadowed, jaw clenched. A familiar grip controlling firm came down on the groom's shoulder. The same grip that once left bruises on her arms, hidden beneath long sleeves, the kind of grip that squeezed decisions out of people. Her son swallowed hard. His father leaned close, whispered something into his ear, quick, sharp. Her son immediately turned away, lips pressed tight, like a soldier following command. Her stomach dropped. He hadn't chosen to look away. He had been told. A memory sliced through her the night she left, the promises she made. I'll come back for you. I'll fight for you. I'll never let him do to you what he did to me. But life didn't follow promises. Custody didn't follow fairness. Truth didn't follow the law. And now, here they were. As if sensing her unravelling, his eyes flickered back just for a second. She caught a glimpse of something lodged deep inside him. Fear. Conflict. Questions he was desperate to ask. Her heartbeat pounded loud enough she swore others could hear it. The officiant began speaking words about love and unity she could barely absorb. Her vision blurred at the edges. She felt like she was suffocating in a room full of oxygen. Every time her son's gaze found hers, his father's hand tightened, thumb digging into the muscle beneath his collarbone. Control. Possession. Claiming the right to steer his son's future. She remembered that hand on her throat once. She remembered the threats whispered so calmly it felt like truth. He stays with me, you're irrelevant. Maybe that lie had grown roots. She gripped the edge of the pew to steady herself. If her son had been told she abandoned him, it would explain so much. The distance, the silence, the hollow way he stared at his shoes after every accidental run-in years ago, as if unsure whether he should hate her or hug her. The officiant finished a passage, and the guests murmured in approval. Her son smiled faintly on cue, but his eyes drifted again, toward her. This time, she let herself smile small, trembling but real. His expression cracked a faltering breath, a tightening jaw. He bit his lip and blinked fast, trying not to let anything show. He was breaking. And that terrified her more than anything. What cage had he been living in? What story kept him afraid to know the truth? She remembered him at 13 asking, "Mum, why can't I choose?" She remembered the custody order slammed like a verdict. She remembered being erased from school forms, medical decisions, birthdays, all coordinated by one man. And now that same man stood proudly beside his son, chest lifted like a victor raising a flag. The officiant asked the guests to rise for the bride's entrance. Chairs scratched the floor in synchronized motion. She stood too, blending into the crowd even though she felt like an intruder carved out of shame. As the bride glided down the aisle, veil shimmering under twinkling lights, the entire room watched her. Except him. Her son's eyes were fixed on the back row on his mother. She pressed a hand to her chest. She mouthed the words, "I'm here." He inhaled sharply, shoulders trembling as if those two words cracked something open inside of him. The father noticed. The grip tightened. The bride reached the altar. The ceremony continued, words about loyalty and commitment echoing emptily. Her son spoke his lines when prompted. His voice was steady, but his hand, the one not held by his bride, remained clenched in a fist. He wiped at his eye discreetly once. The audience thought it was emotion from love. She knew better. His fear was leaking through the seams of perfection. When rings were exchanged, the father stepped closer, eyes sharp like a hawk watching its prey. Every move her son made seemed choreographed, rehearsed, not for romance, but compliance. As applause erupted around her, she felt none of the joy others did. Instead, she understood something chilling. Her son wasn't starting his life today. He was being taken, owned, silenced, traded like a prize for loyalty. Her pulse hammered. What did his father gain by controlling him this tightly? What secrets were locked behind that groom's strained smile? And why? Did her son look like a man being walked to a cage instead of a marriage? As the crowd cheered louder, she stayed still, a statue made of heartbreak and suspicion. She had seen enough to know one thing. He needed her more now than ever. She didn't come here to disrupt a wedding. She came here to save her son. She noticed her before anyone else. The bride, a young woman, breathtaking in white lace, standing at the threshold of the barn. Her bouquet was held tightly, knuckles pale, as though gripping the flowers might keep her steady, keep her afloat. The air around her seemed to shimmer with anticipation, nerves, and something else, something heavier, something unsaid. And then their eyes met. The bride didn't look with the expected curiosity or suspicion. Not at all, she looked with recognition. Almost apology. The mother's chest tightened. Recognition. Apology. What could she possibly know? How could she possibly understand the tangled web that had silenced years of motherly love? The bride's lips twitched a small, fleeting smile, like a candle flame flickering in a sudden draught. Not smugness, not malice, but understanding, sympathy, a quiet, heavy sort of sorrow. Her mind raced. Did she know what they told him? Did she know what they made him believe? Did she know that the mother who raised him, loved him, and fought for him had been erased from his life? The bouquet trembled slightly in the bride's hands as she stepped closer to the altar. Her eyes flicked towards the groom, the son and the shadowed figure beside him, his father every bit as controlling as he had been when she'd last seen him. Every gesture calculated, every smile rehearsed. And then, almost imperceptibly, the bride's gaze shifted back to her. It was a warning, or maybe an acknowledgement, a whispered message in silence. I see her. I see what's happening. I'm sorry. The mother's throat tightened. She wanted to speak, to ask, to beg for clarity. But no words came. Her voice felt small, useless against the weight of the secret she carried. The guests were bustling past now, unaware of the silent exchange happening at the edge of the barn. Aunts fussed with dresses, groomsmen adjusted ties, and somewhere a child giggled, swinging a tiny corsage from her wrist. The world continued, vibrant and oblivious, while her heart pounded a warning. Something hidden was about to surface. She remembered her son's childhood, how he had once trusted everyone with ease, how his laughter could light a room. She remembered teaching him to speak softly, to love fully, to trust wisely. And now, standing on the edge of this ceremony, she realized how much of him had been shaped by omission and careful storytelling. And the bride had somehow seen it too. The bouquet shifted in her hands again, a subtle tremor. She wasn't nervous for herself, she was nervous for him. Her protective instinct showed in the smallest gestures, in the way her eyes darted between the father and the groom. The mother realized, with a sinking heart, that the bride wasn't just a participant in this wedding. She was a witness. Her chest ached. She wanted to cross the room, take the bride's hand and ask quietly, "Do you know? Do you understand? Can you help him?" But the bride stepped forward, deliberately keeping a polite distance, her smile tight and careful. The mother noticed how the bride's eyes softened whenever they landed on her son. She noticed how she seemed to calculate every step, every movement, as if the world around them were a fragile bubble ready to shatter. Something was being hidden. Something that no music, no flowers, no laughter could mask. The ceremony began in earnest. Guests turned their attention forward, some chatting quietly, others snapping photos. But the mother's focus was divided. Every glance between the bride and the groom and between the bride and herself carried meaning. A silent conversation she could almost understand. The bride caught her eye again, and this time she nodded slightly, almost imperceptibly. A mother recognizes a nod meant for protection. A nod meant, I'm aware, I see, I'm sorry it's come to this. Tears pricked her eyes. She blinked them away, afraid anyone might notice. But the warmth of that acknowledgement, that recognition burned through her chest like sunlight through winter clouds. She wasn't invisible. Not completely. Not yet. Her mind raced. Could she trust this young woman? Could she rely on her to be the only ally in a room full of people who had rewritten history? The father stood nearby, eyes sharp and calculating. He hadn't noticed the exchange. Or maybe he had, his attention was mostly on controlling his son's every gesture, but the subtle communication between the bride and the mother had escaped him. For now. The mother's pulse quickened. The room felt smaller, tighter, more dangerous. Every familiar face, the relatives who had avoided her earlier, the guests who had glanced and looked away, seemed to shrink into irrelevance. Only her son mattered. Only the bride's secret sympathy mattered. A shift in the air made her step back slightly. The father's shadow loomed over the groom's shoulder and the groom stiffened, hands trembling ever so slightly. The mother fully realized that her son was being guided, not by choice but by force, and she understood with cold clarity that the bride's sympathy was not for her. It was for him. Her heartbeat thundered. This was bigger than a wedding. Bigger than unspoken invitations. Bigger than exclusion. It was a story about control, about manipulation, about lies so deep that even a young man's love for his mother had been strained to the breaking point. And the bride, the one who should have only cared about romance and celebration, had noticed. She had seen the missing truth. And she had silently chosen to acknowledge it. A flush of gratitude warmed her chest. A small, fragile hope flared. Perhaps not all witnesses were on the wrong side. Perhaps, amidst this web of deceit, someone could help her navigate the treacherous path she had stumbled into. The music swelled. Guests quieted. The ceremony was moving forward, each step deliberate, each smile measured. The mother tucked her hands into her lap, gripping them until her knuckles ached. She had come to a wedding she wasn't invited to. She had stepped into a room full of people pretending nothing was wrong. But she had seen the bride's secret smile. And with that small human acknowledgement, she knew she was not alone. For the first time that day, a single thought burned steadily in her chest. I can do this. I will find the truth. The barn was quiet now, save for the soft rustle of dresses and the low hum of tension vibrating beneath the polished wood floors. Guests leaned forward in polite anticipation, smiles poised, hands folded, cameras ready. But beneath the veneer of celebration, she felt it, the tremor of unease in the air, subtle yet undeniable. Her son stood at the altar, the groom in appearance but not in spirit. The navy suit hugged his frame perfectly, each crease sharp and precise, yet his shoulders slumped slightly as if the weight of the world rested there. His hands trembled against the ring box he held too tightly. He was trying. Oh, he was trying. But every attempt faltered under the scrutiny of the man behind him, his father. The officiant cleared his throat, a crisp sound meant to usher joy into the moment. Do you, Jonathan, take... Her son's lips parted. Nothing. Silence hung heavy, oppressive and deliberate. His jaw tightened. A single bead of sweat traced a line down his temple bone. Jonathan, the officiant prompted again, eyes flicking toward the father. A subtle warning was conveyed, with a tilt of the head. The father's hand rested lightly, almost possessively on his son's shoulder, a silent assertion. Do it my way. He swallowed. Words formed and vanished. I take... His voice cracked, soft, almost inaudible. She flinched at the fragility she hadn't seen since he was a child, the one who used to cry over skinned knees or lost toys. He looked older, stronger, but inside, He was still the boy she held through storms and nightmares. The father leaned in slightly, whispering something so fast she couldn't catch it. The groom flinched, hesitated, then repeated words that sounded almost rehearsed, almost borrowed from a script he did not write. Each phrase felt measured, corrected in real time. A wedding, she thought bitterly, should feel like joy. This was negotiation, a contract enforced with invisible chains. The bride's eyes flicked towards the groom. She noticed his hesitation. Her bouquet shifted in her hands, a silent gesture of nervous support but also awareness recognition of the struggle hidden beneath the groom's carefully tailored exterior. She leaned in just slightly as if to offer reassurance. He needs her to see, the mother thought. He needs someone who remembers who he really is. The officiant's eyes darted toward the father too often, measuring the father's subtle nods and micro-expressions before approving the groom's next words. Each time the father's presence reminded the son who held the power, whose hand orchestrated the steps in this so-called ceremony. She felt a sudden chill not from the morning air, but from the realization that this vow, the one spoken under the guise of love, was tainted by control. What kind of promise is being made here? Who demanded it? And why did the world look on as if it were natural? The groom's voice wavered again. I promise to honor, he faltered. Words slipped through his fingers. He glanced toward her instinctively, a fraction of recognition in his eyes, but the father's grip nudged him upright, stiff, unyielding, his lips pressed thin. He continued, but the words were hollow, rehearsed, stripped of the warmth she once nurtured. Her chest tightened. The mother gripped the edge of the pew, nails digging into the wood. The sound of each word, carefully constructed, corrected mid-air, echoed like a confession. This wasn't a wedding, it was a performance, a declaration forced from a child whose voice had been muted too many years ago. The bride's smile faltered for a split second. Sympathy flickered across her features. She leaned closer to the groom, offering subtle cues, a gentle squeeze of her hand on the bouquet, a slight nod of encouragement, a silent message. I see you. You don't have to pretend for me. Ah, the mother's eyes blurred. She blinked rapidly, trying to hold back tears. Every glance between them was heavy with unspoken truth. She understood the silent language instantly. The bride knew more than she should. Perhaps she had been told nothing, yet had already seen the tension. Perhaps she understood instinctively a mother's instinct, mirrored across the lines of generations. The father cleared his throat sharply, his presence demanding attention. His jaw was rigid, eyes locked on his son, the subtle lines around his mouth hardening with impatience. He whispered again, his words inaudible but commanding. Each time the groom flinched, caught, corrected, performed. Gods, what have they done to him? The mother thought. What chains have they woven? The ceremony continued, guests applauding at the appropriate moments, laughing softly when light-hearted prompts appeared. But she noticed the cracks, the pauses that weren't meant to be there, the way the groom's eyes sought her from beneath his lashes, seeking refuge in someone who would remember him. When the rings were exchanged, a tremor passed through his hands. The father's grip, subtle yet firm, guided the motion. She imagined the weight of obligation pressing against his chest, constricting the very breath from his lungs. The bride smiled faintly, carefully, aware of the invisible struggle. For a moment, the mother imagined herself stepping forward, catching her son in her arms. She imagined whispering words no one else would hear. It's okay. You're safe. I see you. But she stayed seated. She was hidden in plain sight, invisible to most, yet profoundly present, watching, waiting, learning. The officiant concluded, voice smooth, practiced, oblivious, by the power vested in me. And as the final words left his mouth, applause erupted. Guests cheered, glasses clinked, music swelled. The world outside celebrated a union. Inside, she observed a different truth. Her son smiled tightly, strained eyes flicking towards her for a brief, stolen moment of recognition. Relief, fear, love, shame, a dozen emotions she couldn't name, flickered across his face before he turned obediently back towards the bride. The father smiled too, a victory smile, beneath the decorum, beneath the flowers and music, and he had won. Or so he thought. But the mother knew something else. The vows had been spoken, the promises made, but they were hollow, forced, incomplete. And the son, he had not spoken for himself. She exhaled slowly, feeling both grief and determination coil together inside her chest. This ceremony might have celebrated love, but it had also revealed the depth of control, the careful erasure, the lies whispered into a young man's heart. And she knew the fight was only beginning. Because unspoken vows can never bind a mother's love. The barn was alive with chatter, laughter, and the subtle clinking of glasses. Guests had fully settled into their seats, masks of decorum carefully in place. But she felt it, the undercurrent of tension that no music could mask. A small movement beside her caught her attention. A young cousin, barely more than a girl, cheeks flushed with nervous energy, slid a hand lightly against her arm. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried weight, shaking the mother to her core. "You're brave for coming," she said. The mother's breath hitched. Brave, brave? She wanted to laugh bitterly, wanted to cry, wanted to reach for the girl and shake her. Brave, she was terrified. She was walking into a room full of people who had rewritten her story, who had erased years of love, years of sacrifice. But the girl's next words silenced her completely. "They said you left him." Lies, layered on lies, stories whispered into the ears of her son, the relatives, the neighbours, lies crafted with meticulous care, designed to erase her from memory, from the heart of the child she had raised. She swallowed hard, a lump rising in her throat. Her mind replayed every stolen birthday, every missed phone call, every carefully fabricated story her ex-husband had told. "They've told him I left, that I abandoned him, that I didn't care." She felt her heart twist painfully. A hollow ache lodged deep in her chest. It wasn't anger, not exactly, not yet. It was grief for the years lost, for the conversations never had, for the trust warped by lies. "And they believe it," she whispered back, barely audible. The young cousin nodded, eyes wide. "They all do. They tell him you didn't want him, that you left and forgot him." Her voice faltered. "But I don't think it's true. I've always known you loved him." The words struck her like lightning. Someone remembered. Someone outside the carefully constructed walls of deception saw the truth. She reached for the girl's hand instinctively, gripping it just enough to steady herself. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for saying that." The girl's hand trembled slightly under hers, but she didn't pull away. "You need to know. Be careful. They don't want anyone asking questions. They've spent a long time making sure no one sees the truth." Her pulse quickened. She had known she wasn't welcome, had known there was more than exclusion at play, but hearing it articulated even in a whisper made it painfully real. They weren't just ignoring her. They were guarding their version of history like a fortress, afraid of discovery. What story are they trying to bury so badly? The mother's eyes swept across the barn. The flowers, the music, the laughter, all seemed suddenly false, like a stage set built to conceal something ugly. And in the centre of it, her son smiling politely, following cues, performing for everyone else, but silent in his own heart. She had come here to see him, to touch the pieces of him that had been hidden, to remind him of the mother he had loved and trusted. But now she realised she had also stepped into something far larger than a wedding. She was intruding into carefully orchestrated control, into lies layered so thick they could have suffocated truth entirely. The young cousin leaned closer, whispering again. If he looks at you, don't force it. Let him see you when he's ready. They've convinced him to be afraid. Afraid her son was afraid of her, or afraid of the story they had told him. Her chest tightened. Every step she had taken to reach this barn, every mile of highway, every fearful heartbeat had led to this. A son who didn't recognize her entirely because someone else had rewritten their past. She let her eyes rest on him again. There was still a flicker, a brief spark of recognition each time he glanced her way. Not anger, not rejection, but uncertainty, confusion, a longing buried under layers of fear and loyalty, misplaced. She whispered to herself, quiet, almost prayer-like, I will reach him. I will reach him before it's too late. The cousin pulled back slightly, glancing around nervously. I shouldn't stay too long, she said, voice shaking. Just be careful. Watch them. Watch his father. The mother nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. I will, she said softly. The girl's eyes met hers one last time, filled with unspoken warning and solidarity. Then she melted back into the crowd, disappearing like a whisper in the wind. Alone again, the mother felt the weight of the barn settle over her like a fog. Every guest, every relative, every smile, it all held a quiet tension she had only begun to notice. Every glance at her son carried the subtle mark of coercion, the pressure of someone else's narrative pressing down. The ceremony continued. Words were exchanged, vows spoken, smiles offered, laughter shared. But the mother could see beneath the surface a groom performing, a father directing, a crowd unaware. And yet, despite all the control, despite the lies, despite the carefully crafted exclusion, she had a small spark of hope. The whispered warning from a child, a stranger in years, yet family in essence, reminded her that truth could still find its way, even in the smallest, quietest of acts. Someone remembered her, someone understood, someone might still be willing to help her reach him. She exhaled slowly, letting the tension release just a fraction. This wasn't hopeless. Not yet. And as her eyes met her son's again, just for a fleeting moment, she saw it the glimmer of recognition, a flicker of the boy she had raised, hidden beneath the groom he had been forced to become. The mother's heart swelled with a quiet, steadfast determination. I will not leave until he remembers. I will not leave until he knows the truth. The barn hummed around her, oblivious to the silent war unfolding within it. The music played, the guests smiled, the ceremony marched onward. But in that quiet, she made a promise to herself, a promise to her son, and to the years stolen by lies. She would speak. She would reveal. She would not be silenced. And with that whispered resolve, she braced herself for the next moment, when courage would demand more than the presence, when confrontation would demand words, and when her son might finally be free to see her as she always had been, his mother. The reception buzzed behind her, a low hum of music, laughter, and clinking glasses. Guests milled about, oblivious to the quiet storm gathering in her chest. She stepped out through the side door, letting the soft evening air wash over her, a thin veil between her and the world inside. The old house next to the barn loomed in fading sunlight, familiar yet distant. Its paint peeled at the corners, and the garden had grown wild where she once tended it with care. Memories clung to the edges of the windows, shadows of a life she had been pushed away from, denied entry into for years. Yet now she felt drawn, as if the house itself were calling her promising answers, or at least fragments of them. She walked slowly, every step careful, reverent, her senses heightened. The old wooden porch creaked beneath her weight, a sound that echoed through her chest. It was uncanny how much of herself she saw in these walls, the quiet mornings, the laughter echoing down the hallways, the arguments muted by doors that were never meant to open to her. A guest had stepped out before her, distracted by the fading light, leaving a door slightly ajar. She froze for a heartbeat, heart thudding in her chest. That door, a door she had always been forbidden to enter, now stood open as if inviting her in. Her hand trembled as she reached for the knob. She turned it slowly, the metal cold against her palm. The door gave way with a whisper, sliding open to a dim room filled with shadows and dust. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of aged paper and something else, something she couldn't name but recognized immediately. Boxes, hundreds of them, stacked carefully along the walls, each labelled in neat handwriting that was familiar and cruelly precise. Court papers, letters to Jonathan, correspondence returned. She took a step in, her breath catching. The floorboards groaned beneath her weight, echoing through the silence like a heartbeat. She approached the nearest box and lifted the lid. The letters spilled out in a cascade of memories. Envelopes she had addressed with trembling hands, sent with hope and love, each returned unread, unopened. Each one a piece of her heart, intercepted, denied, hidden. Tears sprang unbidden to her eyes. She sank to the floor, sifting through them, tracing the worn paper with trembling fingers. The ink, her handwriting, the careful folds, all of it meant for him, for her son, and yet none of it had reached him. Who had taken them? Who had built this wall between her and the boy she raised? Every unopened letter felt like a betrayal, every returned envelope a testament to the control someone had wielded over her life and her son's. Her mind raced. The father. Of course. Only he could have orchestrated this, intercepting every attempt at communication, every effort to maintain a connection, every letter, every call blocked, every message rerouted or discarded. She ran her hands over the pile, each letter a thread in the tapestry of a stolen childhood. She imagined the moments he had wondered where she was, moments he had longed for a word, a presence, a touch from her, all denied, all stolen. A sob caught in her throat. The room spun slightly and she pressed her hands against her knees to steady herself. The air was thick, filled with years of silence, of secrets, of absence. Yet there was more. Behind the boxes, she noticed folders stacked neatly on a shelf. Court documents, custody orders, affidavits, evidence meticulously collected to support the narrative that she had abandoned her son. She had fought in the courtroom. She had endured endless hearings, but somehow, even there, her words had been twisted, her efforts intercepted. She pulled a folder down and opened it. Her handwriting stared back at her notes, pleas, explanations. The dates confirmed it. She had tried over and over to reach him, to remind him she was still there, to assert her love in the face of a system that seemed determined to silence her. And yet, everything had been blocked, redirected, returned. A cold realization settled over her like ice. All those years of absence, all that distance, had not been because she left him. She had been erased, hidden, walled off from her son by someone who feared her truth. Her fingers shook as she held a letter close to her chest. The words she had written years ago, a mother's love pouring out onto paper, suddenly felt both fragile and indestructible. The truth was still here. She had only to find a way to deliver it. She sank against the wall, breath shallow, mind racing. The door behind her creaked slightly. Someone was approaching. A guest, oblivious, probably returning from the gardens. Panic and fear coiled in her chest. She wasn't supposed to be here. Not in this house, not in this room, not touching the evidence of lies long hidden. But she couldn't leave. Not now. This was the room where years of silence, manipulation, and theft of love had been stored. This was the place where the narrative of her absence had been cemented, and this was where she would begin to reclaim it. She opened another box. Letters, envelopes, scribbled notes, each one addressed to Jonathan, each one intercepted. She held them close, inhaling the faint scent of ink and paper, a scent that reminded her of all the nights she had written by lamplight, hoping her words would reach him. Cool, somewhere outside, laughter floated in, bright and oblivious. Inside, the mother felt the gravity of years pressing down, crushing and clarifying all at once. She understood now that the battle wasn't just about presents at a wedding. It wasn't about showing up, about confronting families or ceremony. It was about truth. Her love had been intercepted. Her words had been stolen. Her son had been fed a story designed to sever him from her completely. And yet, she was here. She pressed the letters to her chest, tears slipping freely now. This room, forbidden, hidden, locked, had revealed the extent of what she was up against, but it had also revealed the path forward. Somewhere in all these letters was the connection she needed. Somewhere in these intercepted messages was proof that she had never left, that she had never stopped loving, that she had never abandoned him. She stood slowly, determination coiling through her limbs like fire. She would find him. She would confront the lies. She would reach him before the wedding, before the story of his life was rewritten any further. The door creaked again. She froze. Footsteps, careful, deliberate. A voice, muffled, approached from the hall. She pressed herself into the shadows, clutching the letters tightly. Her heart thudded like a drum. And as the footsteps neared, she realized she wasn't just uncovering old lies. She was standing on the threshold of a truth so powerful it could change everything. She inhaled, exhaled, and stepped out of the shadows. The next chapter was waiting, and she would face it head-on. She didn't hear him at first, not the soft scrape of shoes against the old wooden floor, not the hesitant inhale that signaled someone standing just outside the doorway. Her fingers clutched the stack of intercepted letters like a lifeline, knuckles white, heart pounding in a rhythm she barely recognized as her own. And then she heard the whisper, "Mom." The single syllable tore through the years of silence, the walls built by lies, the carefully constructed narrative of absence. She turned slowly. There he was, her son, older, taller, but still unmistakably him. His eyes, once full of playful light, now shimmered with confusion, fear, and an ache she had only glimpsed in childhood nights when nightmares had stolen his sleep. Tears were already running down her cheeks. She couldn't stop them, didn't want to. I didn't know where to find you," he said, voice cracking, trembling. His hands fumbled, dropping slightly at his sides. I tried to call you. I thought you left me." The letters in her hands were suddenly heavier. He stepped closer, hesitant, unsure. The man who had been groomed, trained, moulded by years of manipulation, was now just a boy in her sight, stripped bare by grief and confusion. "Who told you that?" she asked softly, voice thick. His jaw tightened. He swallowed, eyes flicking to the floor, then up at her again. My father. He showed me papers, documents, letters you supposedly sent and then never came. He said you didn't care, that you left, that I was not wanted." The mother's chest ached, every word a knife twisting deeper. "All lies," she whispered, tears falling freely now. "All of it. Every single word." His eyes widened, disbelief etched into the creases of his young face. "But why?" he asked, voice trembling. "Why would they? Why would he make me hate you?" Her fingers pressed against his shoulders instinctively, anchoring him, steadying herself at the same time. "Because it kept you close to him," she said quietly, bitterly. "Because he wanted control. Because he thought if you believed the lie, you'd never remember me, never need me, never see him for who he really is." He looked down, unable to meet her gaze at first, then slowly, tears falling freely, he lifted his eyes. "They needed me to hate you. It kept me here," he whispered, voice breaking. "It kept me obedient, quiet, afraid to question, afraid to reach out." The room seemed to shrink around them, the air thick with years of stolen moments, of stolen love, of the quiet, methodical erasure of their bond. She held him tighter, letting him cry into her shoulder, listening to the sobs that had been held back for decades. Every tear was a confession, a release, a reclamation of a life they had almost been denied. "Do you understand now?" she whispered, brushing hair from his face. "It wasn't because I left. It wasn't because I didn't care. Every moment I couldn't be there, I was fighting. I was writing. I was trying. I never stopped loving you." He shook his head, unable to speak for a moment, as if his lungs were filled with years of stolen words. "All this time, I thought I'd lost you forever." "You weren't lost," she said softly. "They just tried to convince you that you were." He swallowed hard, taking in shaky breaths. "All those letters, they never reached me," he said, eyes wide as he noticed the envelopes clutched in her hands. "Every time I wondered, every time I hoped, they were returned. All of them. Never mine." She nodded, letting him see the truth in her eyes. "They were kept from you. Every letter, every word, every attempt to hold you close. But I never stopped trying. I never stopped hoping." He stepped closer, trembling, and pressed his forehead against hers. The years of distance, of silence, of lies seemed to melt away in that single gesture. She could feel the warmth of his skin, the rhythm of his heartbeat, and in that moment, he was no longer a stranger in a suit, a groom performing under coercion. He was her son. His voice came, barely audible, choked with emotion. "Why would he do this? Who stands to gain from breaking us?" Her lips pressed together, tasting both sorrow and resolve. "Power," she whispered. "Control, fear. He wanted you to need him more than anyone else. He wanted your obedience, your trust, your life, directed by his hand. But it's over. It stops now. You see the truth and now you know. No one can take that from you." He let out a long, shuddering breath, as if exhaling years of stolen air. I don't know how to feel," he admitted, voice trembling. Angry, hurt, guilty, all at once. She nodded, understanding. "It's okay. All of it is okay. Feel it, let it out. But don't let it stay locked inside. That's what they wanted to make you doubt yourself, doubt love, doubt me. But you can reclaim it. We can reclaim it. Together." He closed his eyes, leaning into her presence. The weight of years pressing down on both of them seemed to ease, just slightly. The locked room, once a vault of separation, of stolen letters and intercepted love, had become a place of reunion, of confession, of beginning again. I hate that I believed them," he whispered finally. "I hate that I thought you left me." "You didn't believe them completely," she said softly. "You remembered enough to notice the lies. And now you see. Now you know the truth." Tears streaked down both their faces. He took one of the unopened letters from her hands and held it gently, as if touching something sacred. She watched him carefully, noting the tremor in his fingers, the rising awareness that this was not just paper and ink, this was history, love, and proof of a bond that could not be broken by lies. The sound of footsteps approached from the hallway outside, distant, unaware of the revelation occurring within these walls. She looked at him, heart tightening. "We need to be careful," she whispered. "But the first step is done. You know now. And that changes everything." He nodded, wiping his tears, still holding the letter close. I need time," he said. "But I'm here. I want to fix it. I want to know you again." Her own tears fell freely. "We will," she said. "Every day we can. I will never leave you again. Not ever." In that moment, the locked room, once a symbol of exclusion, of stolen years, of lies, transformed into a place of promise. A place of truth reclaimed, a place where a mother and son could finally begin to heal together. And for the first time in years, she felt hope fragile, trembling, but undeniably alive. Because the bond they shared, no matter how hidden, how interrupted, or how nearly broken, was still unshakable. The son who had been forced to believe he was abandoned was now awake to the truth. The mother who had fought in silence now had her child back. And nothing, not lies, not manipulation, not time, could take that away again. The sudden slam of the front door made her jump. The room, still thick, with the quiet aftermath of revelation, seemed to shrink around them. And then he appeared, her ex-husband, a storm in human form. His face was red, veins prominent along his temple, eyes wild with disbelief and fury. "You!" he bellowed, voice cracking like thunder across the room. "What are you doing here?" Her son flinched, instinctively stepping back, but she didn't move. She had waited years for this confrontation, this exposure. Every fibre of fear and hesitation that had shackled her for decades now burned with resolve. She stood firm. "I'm here," she said calmly, voice low but unwavering. "I'm here for him. I'm here for the truth." The father's hand shot out, grabbing his son by the arm with a grip meant to assert dominance, meant to silence, meant to drag him back under the weight of lies. "Come on," he hissed, voice tight with anger. "We're leaving. Now." Her son wavered, his eyes flicking between them, a storm of confusion and fear and realization raging inside him. But something had shifted in that moment, something fragile and potent. A spark of agency, the first decision he had made for himself in years. "No," he said, voice firm yet trembling. "I'm staying. I'm not going anywhere with you." The father's grip faltered. His eyes widened, mouth opening and closing as if he hadn't expected defiance, especially not from the son he had moulded into obedience. "What are you saying?" he barked, voice raw. "You can't... I won't." The mother stepped closer, keeping her gaze locked on him. "He's speaking for himself," she said softly, deliberately. "He's choosing. Not you, not the lies, not the manipulation. He's choosing truth." The father's nostrils flared. Rage trembled along every line of his face. He looked from the mother to the son back again, as if seeing a reality he had never imagined, one in which his control was slipping, crumbling, unraveling. "You think you can just," he began, but the words fell short. There was no power in them here, not anymore. The room, once silent in passive compliance, now pulsed with revelation. The letters, the intercepted words, the long years of exclusion, it all stared back at him, exposing the deceit he had wielded so carefully in. Her son took a step forward, placing himself squarely between them. "I'm done listening to lies," he said, voice gaining strength with each word. "I'm done being manipulated. I'm done believing you instead of her." The father staggered back slightly, as if the weight of those words hit him physically. His eyes darted to the letters clutched in her hands, to the folders spread across the floor, and for the first time, the meticulous construction of his control felt fragile, vulnerable, exposed. You don't understand," he stammered, voice wavering. "I did this for you, for your future." "For me?" the son echoed, disbelief heavy in his tone. "For me? By teaching me to hate my mother, by hiding every word, every attempt she made to reach me, by lying to me my whole life." The father's hands shook now, the anger melting into something darker, fear. Not of the law, not of social judgment, but of the truth itself. Of the bond he had tried to sever, the love he had tried to bury, and the son he had tried to mould into obedience, now standing awake, aware, claiming himself. The mother inhaled deeply, feeling years of suppressed courage rise in her chest. "This stops now," she said. "No more lies, no more manipulation, no more control over what is sacred, a mother and her child. Your power over him ends here." The father's eyes narrowed, fury still present, but laced now with uncertainty. He looked at his son, who held the mother's gaze, who held the letters, who held the truth. And for the first time, he realized that authority built on lies cannot stand against love illuminated. I, the father began, faltering. Words that had once commanded obedience now sounded hollow, meaningless, irrelevant. He had been unmasked, stripped of the illusion of control he had cultivated for decades. Her son took another step closer to her, drawing strength from her presence, from her unwavering stance. I am not afraid anymore, he said, voice steadier. I see everything now. You don't get to decide my story. You don't get to erase her. I choose her. I choose truth. The father's hand twitched, unsure whether to strike, to leave, to defend a crumbling fortress. But the room had shifted. The letters, the evidence of lies, the whispered confessions of a cousin, the mother's unwavering courage, they had all built a wall around the son that could not be breached by fear or rage. The father's chest rose and fell rapidly, each inhale heavier than the last. For the first time he understood the story he had written was no longer his. He had been outmaneuvered, not by force, but by revelation, by resilience, by love that could not be silenced. The mother placed a gentle hand on her son's shoulder. We can leave this room together, she said softly, or we can stay and reclaim what's been stolen. But we will do it together. And you can stand as the man you truly are, not the one they tried to force you to be. Her son nodded, taking her hand. A quiet, unspoken solidarity passed between them. The father's attempts at control flickered, weakened, then finally shattered. You don't understand, he whispered one last time, the words barely audible, stripped of menace. He was exposed, cornered, powerless before the bond he had tried to destroy. The mother let her son's hand squeeze hers. I understand perfectly, she said quietly, and it ends here. A slow, deliberate silence filled the room. Outside, the faint sounds of the reception continued: music, laughter, clinking glasses, oblivious to the quiet victory inside these walls. If truth is a door, she thought, then this one has just been kicked open. The father stumbled back, defiance flickering, then fading. He had lost control, lost authority, lost the story he had tried to dictate for years, and in its place, her son stood awake, aware, free to choose love over fear, truth over lies. The mother exhaled slowly, chest tight, heart pounding. This was more than a confrontation. It was reclamation. Years of silence, manipulation, and absence could not undo this moment, could not undo what they had rebuilt in the shadow of lies. Her son looked at her, eyes steady now, no longer wavering, filled with recognition, understanding, and the first taste of liberation. He was his own person now, he was hers again. And the father finally understood. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. The moment her son chose her, the world outside the locked room shifted, subtly at first, like a distant change in weather, but enough to be felt. The father, defeated and breathless, lingered a few seconds longer, his eyes darting, searching for one last thread of control to pull, but there was nothing left. That realization washed over him like a cold tide. Without a word, he exited the room, shoulders stiff, steps uneven. He didn't slam the door this time. It clicked shut gently, and somehow that small sound felt more final than any angry exit could. Silence hovered, but this silence wasn't cruel. It breathed. It healed. Her son squeezed her hand as if afraid the moment might dissolve if he let go. She squeezed back, reassurance flowing through that small connection. A bond once severed now, stitching itself slowly, painfully, beautifully. Come on, he whispered. We shouldn't hide anymore. They stepped out of the room together, into a different world. The reception hall had lost its glow. The music faltered like a record slowing under a dying battery. Guests stood in tense clusters, whispers spreading faster than truth. Faces that once avoided her gaze now stared openly, shocked, unsure, exposed. They had known pieces of a script written by illusionary hands, but the narrative was changing. And then she saw the bride, standing alone near the entrance, bouquet lowered, eyes shining with a decision already made. When she reached them, she took the groom's free hand, threading her fingers tightly through his, her chin lifted with quiet determination. "I'm with you," she told him. To the mother, she added softly, "I'm so sorry for what they did." It was not guilt in her voice, only recognition. A woman who knew what it meant to live under someone else's thumb. Her son, strengthened by the support on both sides, drew a breath that sounded like his first free inhale in years. "We're going outside," he announced. Not a question, not a plea, a choice. The bride nodded, a defiant spark in her eyes, as if she understood this wedding was no longer about floral arrangements and family seating charts. It was about liberation. They crossed through the hall. No one stopped them. Even the once dominant father, now in a far corner, stared at the floor, his empire reduced to fragments. Then the night greeted them, soft lights strung above like captured stars, a gentle breeze lifting the tension from their shoulders. The air felt easier to breathe. They settled at a quiet table under the canopy of light. The music inside resumed faintly, but it no longer belonged to their moment. For a while, none of them spoke, not out of discomfort, but out of reverence. Truth takes space to settle. Finally, her son broke the silence. "I used to think it was odd. Why every time I'd ask questions about you, Dad got angry. Why he'd shut the conversation down. Why holidays felt incomplete." His voice trembled with memories reshaping themselves. "But I trusted him. I thought he was protecting me." The mother blinked back tears, slow, warm, a mixture of joy and grief. "I never stopped trying," she said. "Every birthday, every milestone, I wrote, I called, I begged to see you." "I know," he whispered, looking down at the letters, her letters that he still held. "They told me you left because you didn't want me." His throat tightened, and I believed them. She reached across the table, fingertips brushing his knuckles. "It's not your fault." He shook his head. "No, it's his." The bride leaned her head gently on his shoulder. "You are not alone in this." Her support was a small miracle, proof that love still lived in this fractured story. He turned to his mother again, eyes softer than before. "I've missed so much, years I can never give back." He swallowed hard. "But if you'll let me, I want to start again." Her heart surged, full and aching and alive. "That's all I've ever wanted," she breathed. Above them, lights flickered slightly, as if nodding their approval. Inside the hall, laughter resumed, artificial and hollow. Here, outside, something real was unfolding, slow but unstoppable. Her son exhaled shakily, almost a laugh. "I feel like I'm seeing everything for the first time. You, my own life." She smiled, fragile but true. That's what freedom feels like. The bride looked at the mother, eyes glimmering with empathy. "He's stronger because of you," she said. "Even without knowing you were there, you kept him alive." The mother covered her mouth, emotions too large to contain. "Thank you," she whispered. "Will you—" Her son hesitated, vulnerability cracking through every syllable. "Stay?" That one question, so gentle, so earnest, held the weight of all the years lost and years yet to come. She felt the sting of tears, not from sorrow this time, but from the overwhelming relief of belonging. "I've waited my whole life to hear you ask me that," she said. His shoulders eased, the first glimpse of peace in his expression. "Ah, then stay," he answered. The night wrapped them in quiet warmth. The stars above seemed to lean in, listening. And though the past remained a timeline carved with the wounds and falsehoods, it no longer defined the future. Tomorrow would hold conversations, hard ones, legal ones, healing ones. But tonight was simple. A mother and son, once torn apart, found each other again beneath borrowed lights, with new hope threading through every heartbeat. The bride intertwined her fingers with both of theirs, completing a new circle, one built not from old scripts, but from truth reclaimed. A new beginning, not loud, not perfect, but real. And that was enough. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Her Truth Matters. Share your thoughts in the comments. What would you do if you were in her shoes? And hit the bell so you never miss another story of love, loss, and quiet courage.